Sometimes I light a cigarette to throw away my care, but when I'm finished lighting it, the ash leaves me impaired. I've been so bad.
Hey guys, it's Christy here with Proposals for Progressives. How are you doing today? I'm doing pretty good, thanks. What I'd like to do today is officially announce the winner for the March Resistance Fund. That was the DC Abortion Fund, and as you can see here from this screenshot, the contribution of $41 was made this week, and I want to thank those of you who support me on Patreon because you are the ones who make this donation possible, as well as Kevin Logan and his matching funds. So thanks to all of the people who make contributions to make the Resistance Fund possible. Today, I want to talk about getting your voice heard by contacting the people who are elected to represent you. And to that end, I'm going to be recording myself calling and leaving a message for my representative on the Republican side, Senator Ron Johnson, because I think it's important to put more pressure on Republicans to let them know how bad Ryan care, Trump care, whatever you want to call it, is for America. And the best way to do that is to call them up, register, and let them know that you vote and that you oppose their plans. And so let's do that. I got put through to voicemail, but I'm going to go ahead and leave a message.
Hi, this is Senator Ron Johnson. Thank you for calling my Senate office. We value everyone's input, so please feel free to leave a message after the tone. If you are expressing an opinion on an issue or vote, your viewpoint will be recorded for my review. If you need personal assistance, a member of my staff will contact you as soon as possible. You can also reach us through my website at ronjohnson.senate.gov. Have a great day.
Hello, I'm a voter from Wisconsin, and I'm calling to register my deep concern about Ryan care, or Trump care, or whatever you want to call it. I have people who are personally impacted by the decisions that are being made to cut access to health insurance services, and if you can't afford health insurance, you don't have access. So I'm strongly encouraging Senator Johnson to oppose any attempts to kick people off of their insurance or have insurance so unaffordable that people can't afford it. And again, I am a registered voter who is personally impacted by this, by people who I care about. And so I'm going to be watching this vote very, very closely and the whole proposal in terms of reforming healthcare in America. My address, you can write to Dr. Christy Winters, that's Kristi Winters, at Thank you very much for your time. And it's really that easy. If you're worried, you can call over the weekend. If you don't want to talk to a real person, you can write up a little script and say what you want. But basically, the goal here is to tell them that you are a voter in their constituency or in the state where they're representing, obviously. Then you want to express clearly what your opinion is on a specific piece of legislation and what you want your representative to do. Then provide the address at which you vote so that they know how to get in contact with you and reply. And it's really that easy. Now we're going to look at the April nominees for the Resistance Fund. The background to this is that I did a hangout with Eli Bosnick and Steve Shives, which was an amazing, fun, great hangout, and you should completely, totally watch it. I'll put a link in the video corner where you can click on it and go watch that video. But during the hangout, Eli and I said this.
And so that's where I come from that allows me to do that. Again, I haven't had your guys' experience, so I feel a little shitty being like, oh, it's so easy. But I want to apologize in advance as someone who hasn't tolerated any abuse for being like, talking to people's great.
Well, I would say that if you and Bering have a conversation about safe spaces and you can get him to a middle ground on safe spaces, I will watch that on repeat. I will donate money to a charity of your choice.
All right.
You can get him to that.
Well, I messaged him. I know he's a busy dude.
As I predicted, Bering found out that his name had been mentioned in a hangout, and within hours he had gotten a hold of Eli, apparently not knowing who Eli was or what he did or anything about Eli, if you watched the hangout with Eli and Bering. But to Eli's credit, Eli did get Bering to agree to the principle that safe spaces are a good thing and are important. Watch here.
let's talk about safe spaces, man. You're very big on safe spaces. I'm fascinated to hear your take.
So this is a perfect example. Safe spaces is a great example, right? Safe spaces are a relatively new, and I'm gonna give this the 101 Gabagoo version. So I hope the audience will forgive me. They're a very basic, very relatively new, relatively unstudied mental health resource, right? Like AA, they get their start in LGBTQ meetings, right? And they are basically placed, and they come from LGBTQ centers where people are.
You mean like a LGBT support group or something?
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Right. That's where they get their start. And they get their start.
Enough,
yeah, absolutely. And they get their start so that kids can go in and say, I'm trans or I'm gay, without someone else saying, I think you're going to hell. I think you're going to burn in hell and you're going to die there forever.
I get that. That's fair enough.
Right, exactly. And that is, and I want to point out, that is how that is used. If you hear about it used another way, it's an abuse of that term.
I hear about fucking cartoons being played and puppy dogs and fucking Play-Doh because Milo Yiannopoulos is doing a talk.
Exactly. And this is absolutely, by any definition, an abuse of a safe space. So
are you saying that version of a safe space is invalid? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. It would be like saying, and this is the example I use. It's not quite on, but I think it'll help the audience. It would be like saying every abuse of therapy, right? Like if I go into therapy and my therapist is like, okay, what do you want to talk about today? And I'm like, actually, I was hoping you would just give me a handy. And he's like, no, man, no. And I'm like, well, so you're against therapy now, right? And that's the problem, is that we've lost the courage to be like, hey, you're using that resource wrong, right? And the best example of this to me is Goldsmiths. I mean, you got kids from the Islamist society screaming safe space and like physically intimidating a lady in it. Like, is there any more obvious example that a term is being misused? Right, and not just misused.
Peaceful protest.
Right, that a term's being misused. But like, the truth of the matter is, like, I understand the temptation to dismiss that term out of hand when you see it being abused as often and as publicly as it has been. But I think that it's still a very useful term. And the example I get, because I always use myself, is like, I'm an atheist, right? And if you were talking to an atheist next week, or someone who didn't believe in God, and they were like, I'd call myself an athist, but Eli Bosnick, he calls himself an atheist, and he got so fat, and he looks like a shaved Harambe costume. He looks like he tried to eat bees, but they made their way out. Like, what you would say is, look, Eli is doing atheism wrong, or Eli doesn't represent atheism. And so when I defend safe spaces, and I will admit, I worked in safe spaces when I went to NYU. I was in a program called The Reality Show, which created sort of mental health workshops, and we did a whole show for the university at the beginning of the year.
And was this for like LGBT people or something? Yeah,
LGBT, but also we had survivor group safe spaces, and I volunteered with RAIN a little bit when I was in college and did some volunteering for them, and there were safe space situations there. And if you go to the LGBT center at NYU, to their safe space, which runs 200 days a year, I doubt anybody who hates, Dave Rubin, who obviously not a fan of the safe space, who would go in there and go, yeah, this is a perfectly healthy environment. Like this app, I don't object to this. And more often than not, when I talk to people who don't like the term safe space, what they're talking about is abuses of safe spaces, right? So one of the ways I want to direct the conversation is not in saying safe spaces are bullshit, safe spaces are babies, like go back and cry to your safe space, because safe spaces are really useful for some people. Like we have green zones, which are for soldiers with PTSD that go to college.
At universities.
Yeah, at university. And there's a bunch of universities that have them in the United States. They're called green zones or green zone training. And they're safe spaces for soldiers who are having problems acclimating back into college life, right? Where it's like, do shots. And it's like, I was getting shot at 10 minutes ago. This is a lot. Right? And, like,
I shouldn't laugh at that. I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many, although I haven't thought about it, but I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many soldiers in college.
No, they because of the bill, there are quite a few, especially in this country, and like the green zone training happens, and like I have a buddy, for instance, who has terrible PTSD from being in a war zone, and like he uses those facilities, and like he's a big fucking dude. Like when the Nazis challenge me to a fight, I'm gonna be like, that's him, that's Eli Bosnick.
and fair enough. He's got actual PTSD. He's been in a war zone.
Absolutely.
What's your take on PTSD from fucking, like the real, ditzy fucking version of PTSD. I got abused on Twitter. Now I have PTSD. I need a safe space.
Right. So this is something that comes up all the time, right? Which is the abuse of a term. Now, I will say there are people who have been diagnosed, and if a medical professional has said someone got PTSD from Twitter, I don't know how, right? I don't know how. But if a doctor said Twitter broke someone's arm, I'd be like, that guy's the doctor, So I will plead ignorance and say that but I do know that there is an abuse of that term. Certainly, there are people who have never been diagnosed with PTSD who use it, and it's the same as people who are like, oh, I'm so OCD, I need my room to be cleaned. And it's like, oh yeah, really? You have that mental illness? Is that a real problem for you? You take medication? Because like I know people, I had students, I had mentees who had OCD, and they're not like pencils go in the cup. They're like, I need to touch the doorknob or I'm gonna lose my shit. Right. Yeah. And so I mean, for me, it falls into the same category of silliness. And I think one of the reasons why people don't hear me rail against it as much is because I would rather the person my buddy who really has PTSD, not feel unwelcome, not feel unsafe, not feel like when I talk about safe spaces being silly, I'm talking about him. I'd rather defend safe spaces knowing the silly will slip in, knowing the ridiculous will slip in. Right, and
isn't that kind of taking advantage of? Isn't this silliness taking the piss out of your mate though? I mean, dickheads playing with fucking Play-Dohs and puppy dogs, and there's your mate sitting in the corner with shell shock, for fuck's sake. Like that's a bit of an insult, isn't it?
No, absolutely, and I think, but I don't think the solution is to dismiss the term entirely. And so what I don't.
No. I'm not saying.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right in that, like, there does need to be a real conversation about mental health resources and what they are and what they aren't. And right now, and this goes back to a little what we were talking about at the beginning, we've turned into enemies so much so that it's like, well, are you pro safe space? Well, of course, everyone's pro safe space. What they're not is pro safe space abuse. What they're not is pro trigger warning abuse. Everyone's pro. I'm trying to use examples that I feel
I get what you're saying.
Right, and we don't want those terms abused, right? So I guess I would say, what I worry about, and I'm gonna poke at you gently here, and I'm interested in your opinion because you've talked about safe spaces and you've talked against safe spaces, but I think it would be fair to say that you were never, when you were talking about safe spaces, you were never talking about my buddy in the green zone space.
No, of course not. Of course not.
You're talking about assholes abusing the term.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think we owe it to ourselves as a community to put up with the silly, and this is my answer, right? To put up with the silly in the name of protecting those that need it.
Yeah, right? So I sort of take the other angle. I see the silly as an affront to your mate, and that's why I speak out against them.
Well, I obviously can't speak for him, and maybe I'll hook you two guys up and you can chat about it. But one of the things that I know for people who really need safe spaces, and I know this because I still, like I said, work as a mentee, and I've worked in various organizations around this kind of stuff, is the silly. I don't believe, and I'm willing to be wrong on this. I'm going off out of my head.
Sorry, just what I'm saying is, I mean, if you accept the silly, then at what point do you stop accepting the silly? What if someone gets a paper cut and they need a safe space, and then someone gets looked at, strangely by a classmate, they need a safe space. Do you keep accepting them all? Do you turn them away ever?
Absolutely. And you make a really good point, which I should clarify. It's not about accepting the silly. It's about because those do need to be reprimanded. Those do need to be changed. Those do need to be called out, right? It's about understanding that we don't reject a term out of hand, right? So just as we don't reject the term atheism because I'm an atheist, right? We won't say, I can't call myself an atheist. Eli's an atheist, right? We'll just say, no,
Yeah,
Eli's
I can accept that. That's
right.
fair.
So one of the things that I really want to see the conversation transform to is I do not want people to pretend that safe spaces aren't being abused. That's unfair, right? To just be like, oh, no, it's all fine. Let them do whatever they want, right? I come to the talk and then they have to go in the other room. And by the way, now 3 out of 5 teachers have to give out blowjobs in that space while it's happening, right? We have to start having a conversation about what is and is not a mental health resource, what is and is not a mental health.
But didn't you just say you'd rather put up with the silly?
I guess when I say put up with the silly, I mean not dismiss the term. So when someone talks to me about safe spaces, I'm positive about safe spaces. I say I'm pro safe space because when they ask me about those questions, I can be specific and say that's an abuse of the term, but the term itself is valuable. I support safe spaces. I support people who need them. I support people who use those facilities, right?
So shouldn't your angle be all for safe spaces, but the pussies can fuck off?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways it is. I think the reason is and again, if it were less black and white, if our culture was a little more subtle in our conversation about this right now, I think we'd have to worry about it less. But right now, one of the reasons, and again, like this isn't an excuse, but like I think a lot of us just end up speaking in such broad strokes because I think about, and again, I keep going back to the same example, so hopefully your audience will forgive me, and you, because it must be boring to listen to. But like, I think about my buddy, right? And I think about him showing up his first day to college and being like, I'm having a bad day. Like I had nightmares. I didn't sleep. I really need someone to talk to. I really need a place to go to. And I'd rather say I'm pro safe space. And then when the time, and make him feel safe to go in there. And then when the time comes where that gets abused at Goldsmiths, right? And I've spoken about this. I'm the biggest SJW in the world, and I always use Goldsmith. Like this is a perfect example. I always talk about the abuses. I say that's not the right way to do it. And those teachers and those students eventually behaved in the right way when they punished those students, right? At first they were like, oh, we're not sure of it. And those students were punished, and they should have been. And it was important to recognize that they abused a system that is meant to help people in
so it does happen. It does.
Oh, that's a safe space abuse.
Yeah. No. I'm saying it gets called out.
Absolutely, yes, it gets called out. But right now the problem is, and tell me if you disagree with this. Right now, when I hear people criticizing safe spaces, I don't hear them saying that's an abuse of a safe space. I hear them saying safe spaces are dumb. Safe spaces are for babies, right? And it's too broad. It's too broad. It's not a subtle enough conversation, and it needs to be, especially if we want to help the people who we all agree need it, right?
Well,
and
I don't think anyone's got an issue with your mate.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think one of the things that comes out is that we're afraid to talk subtly, right? Because look, here's the thing. If you made a video tomorrow, right, that was like, I'm okay with safe spaces, right? There would be a huge, because you're an anti-social justice guy, right? You're stuck in your brand, right? So for you to try and have this kind of subtle conversation, I mean it for me too. Like I keep using you, but
we're making a video right now, and I'm saying that.
Right. No, but like if I made a video tomorrow being like safe spaces are bullshit, right? If that was my title, right? And in it I talked about the bullshit that goes on in safe spaces, right? I wouldn't have fit the brand of being totally fine with everything, right? Of everything being absolutely okay. And that's genuinely what people expect, right? I bet when you said I was pro safe space at the beginning, you didn't think that I would be, and maybe I'm wrong, but you didn't think I would acknowledge the mistakes that are made in safe spaces, the abuses of that terminology, the abuses of trigger warnings, and all
I honestly didn't know. I was hoping you'd have the nuance you'd treat it with, and that's good.
And I think when we recognize that, think about how much more, I'm going to use a term that can sometimes people don't like, but how much better allies we can be, right? Because like we all want to help those people out, right? And we all at the same time want to protect free speech. One of the
Because of that, I contacted Eli within, I don't know, half a day of seeing this because of the time zone things, where, sometimes it's a bit lagged. And I told him, fair enough, mate, you got Bearing to say that safe spaces were a good thing, and then you get to choose a charity of your choice. And Eli's like, I think he didn't want the extra work, which is fair enough. So instead, what I've done is, based on the content of Scathing Atheist and God Awful Movies podcast, I know that the guys there are committed to a lot of principles. For that reason, I'm nominating, on behalf of Eli Bosnick, the American Humanist Association. The other nominee, again inspired by the content that Eli and the other guys put out, is the Secular Organizations for Sobriety. They're a nonprofit network of autonomous, non-professional local groups dedicated to helping individuals achieve and maintain sobriety or abstinence from alcohol and drug addictions, food addictions, and more, without making reference to gods. You can vote by going up into the top right-hand corner and clicking on the eye. You'll see there a link to the video with Eli and Steve and myself, as well as your chance to vote for which organization you would like to see the funds go to. And I might as well take this opportunity to say that if you want to become a patron of mine through Patreon, you can then also join me for my monthly patron hangout. And I announced this well in advance. This time I got myself organized. It's going to be tomorrow as a reminder for those of you who didn't see the other announcement or forgot about the earlier announcement. If you are a supporter of this channel through Patreon, then about 15 minutes before the scheduled hangout, the details of which and the various time zones I will post as a visual rather than trying to do it through an audio medium. That link to the hangout will be posted 15 minutes before the top of the hour in a post that is for patrons only. Thank you again to my patrons. If you're doing as little as $1 a month or $3 a month, everything is helpful, everything is important, and you are helping to make change in the world. So thank you. Alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for me, but before I go, I want you guys to make a pledge wherever you are in the world, especially if you're in the United States, but wherever you are in the world. This week, contact one of your elected representatives and tell them what you think. If you haven't done it in a while or you haven't done it ever, it's a good experience. You should definitely engage with democracy and keep in contact with the people who represent you. So give them a call. If they're a supporter, if there's someone that you know already is good on the positions that you support, then call that person up, whoever he or she is, and say, thank you for working to fight for the issues that we both believe in, and I just wanted to call and say thank you and let you know you're doing a great job. Believe me, politicians like to hear that. And if the person that you're going to be calling you think does not have the interests that you have and at heart, and they're not working in that direction, then call them up and leave a message saying that you're aware of that, and that you oppose the kind of agenda that they have, and that you want to take it in a different direction. Until next time, guys, I've been Christy, you have been awesome, and we'll talk again really soon. Bye-bye.